Australia's premier tells hateful protesters, get to Florida, as there's no place for you in Victoria.
Speaker, I'm saddened to have to rise to make a statement to the House in relation to quite shameful conduct out at the City of Monash last week, and decisions that, very sadly, the CEO and the Mayor of that council have had to make in relation to cancelling a number of events that are about celebrating diversity, events that are about sending a message to often some of the most vulnerable people in our Victorian community, that they are loved, they are respected, they are safe, and they are supported by their government and their community. Now, I make this statement not just as the Premier of the state where equality is not negotiable. I also make this statement as a long-time ratepayer in the City of Monash. I don't know how many of these protesters, with not an exercise of free speech but an exercise in hate speech, violence, bigotry, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, the list goes on, ugly scenes on any measure, including, can I say, death threats against council officers and councillors. It is a disgrace. It's shameful. And my message to those people is very clearly, if you want to behave like the worst elements of the Floridian Republican Party, well, get to Florida. Head over there, where your hateful views might be worth something. They're worth nothing here. We won't stand for this sort of ugly behaviour. It's appalling. And I again make the point, it's not about free speech. This is hate speech, plain and simple. Plain and simple. It is wrong. It is out of step with the values of fair-minded, decent, mainstream Victorians. It is on the fringe. But enough about those people. Let's send the clearest message, Speaker, that equality is not negotiable, and despite the carry-on and the shameful behaviour of a small few, this government and this community remains committed to every single Victorian, no matter who they are or who they love.
Dan Andrews, Premier of Victoria, Australia, which is essentially like what we would call a governor in America, told hateful protesters to get to Florida after a drag event was cancelled due to repeated threats. Speaking to Victoria's Parliament, Andrews condemned the shameful conduct of right-wing protesters who threatened a drag storytime event at a public library in Melbourne. The local city council said the Oakleigh Library would no longer go ahead amid threats of violence against the performer, library staff, councillors, and the families of attendees. Andrews slammed the anti-LGBTQ+ protests and threats as appalling, saying that Australians, quote, won't stand for that ugly behavior, end quote. Florida has been a hotbed amid a growing pushback against LGBTQ+ rights in the U.S., with lawmakers in the state championing legislation attacking friendly family drag performances, LGBTQ+ education in schools, and gender-affirming healthcare for trans people. Andrews said similar moves to attack LGBTQ+ people in Australia are not about free speech, they are about hate speech, plain and simple. On Twitter, Andrews said, quote, the Americanization of Australian politics has no place in here, and that the anti-LGBTQ protesters' hateful views don't either, end quote. And well said. I mean, my gosh, that there is a legislative leader standing up when he doesn't have to, and standing up and saying, this won't be here. The sad part about that story is Florida is no longer a punchline. A punchline finds a little bit of humor or a silver lining like Florida Man. That's a punchline. This is not. This is basically everyone in the world, because Australia is, front and center in Western social democracies, saying, we see Florida, you are a terrible place, and this is where we want to send our hateful people, because they'll fit in better with you than they will in the land down under.
Yeah, you're in trouble when a former penal colony realizes that you are no longer a punchline and you're just an insult. That's really bad.
Yeah.
I was a visiting scholar at the University of Sydney in Australia for about 6 months in 2017. So it was just right after Trump got elected. And there were so many folks there that I got to know really, really well. And all they wanted to do was talk about Trump. Like, that is like the kind of rise of Trump in particular. It was such a they had such a difficult time understanding what was going on in American politics. And I mean, truth be told, so did I, right? Like, that is, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. One of my dear friends who I met there actually is coming to visit in a few weeks, and he was like, should I go to Florida? And we had that discussion about what that means. Like, that is like this is not anomalous. It's not specific to Australia. The whole idea of, and I'm grateful for the premier for saying what needs to be said. I mean, I agree he didn't have to say that, and he went on a limb and said that. Like, I would also just, the Americanization of, I mean, that's U.S. empire. The United States, and Florida in particular, has so much influence on shaping so many different countries' worldview, from Australia to Cuba to Haiti to so on and so. Like, that is, we can't imagine that, what happens locally is felt globally. It's never kind of minimized or localized. It's enormous and horrifying at the same time.
Well, I mean, I hope these stories, again, as they continue to come out, and it's not the first one we've seen with, whether it's politicians in other states or other places referencing Florida, it's a brand now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the brand that our governor is going for as he has national goals to maybe run for president, that he wants to be labeled as the hate state.
Yeah.
That isn't a brand that unifies voters, and it doesn't expand his voter base. And it doesn't do anything to help his case. So I'm, as terrible as these stories are, they're great that they're happening. And I think, as you start seeing celebrities and, I'm kind of sad that there's no late night talk shows right now because, again, DeSantis is getting a free ride because there's no writers out there doing jokes about him right now. What a great time to pass terrible legislation.
Yeah. Well said.
And we've talked a lot on here the last couple of weeks about Equality Florida issuing the travel advisory, asking people to think twice before they come to Florida to visit or to move here or to open a business here. Equality Florida is not the only one saying it. There are other countries that with their equivalent of our State Department that are saying, think twice about going to the United States. Right. And some of them list Florida. Australia's takes a little bit of a lighter touch, but there are certainly countries, and there was a great article this weekend, I think it was in Politico. I want to say like Britain or Ireland are a couple of them, and several other Western nations that say, don't go to U.S., not only for gay rights, but also for our gun violence and our other social policies. So, I mean, Florida's just leading the pack in a very, very bad way.
If other states and the world makes decisions to bypass Florida in tourism, it will be catastrophic for Florida. And the people that are going to be the most hurt are the ones that are the greatest supporters of the LGBTQ community in Florida. You know who doesn't care about what the Australian Victorian state premier says? Erdogan.
I know.
And Bolsonaro and Putin and the president of Hungary. They don't care what these people say. Because they're authoritarian. Right. And that's what all of these people have in common. It is beginning to have world reaction. This should be while we laugh of the Americanization, it should frighten us. Oh, yeah. Because Britain today, the King Charles's coronation is just a few days ago. And the number one topic out of coronation in terms of protest around the world is, this is what the United Kingdom brought to the world through colonization. Mm-hmm. And they raped the world in terms of its resources, and they created slavery in the world. It's first and foremost pegged on the United Kingdom. Now, whether that's fair or not, colonialism is a concept that flows directly out of British Empire. When you hear that dog whistle of Americanization of hate, they're blowing a dog whistle like colonialism from Britain. And it's been 200 years, and Britain is still suffering from the actions of the colonial society that they had. This is not a sustainable attitude of America in the world, too. I agree with Julio we are revered in the world because of what America has represented. Oftentimes very bad, but at the same time as a vision in terms of the democratic principles that we want And this is beginning to eat away at it. It's a dangerous time.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.